It's just after I see a movie, I like to go get a piece of pie and talk about it. It's sort of a little tradition I have. Do you like to get pie after you see a good movie?
Hey, everybody, welcome back to A Piece of Pie, the queer film podcast. This is a very special, monumental episode. This is episode 100. And I didn't know how to really celebrate 100 episodes. So I kind of asked around and I kind of was taking suggestions and things. And what I kind of landed on was to just get a bunch of my contributors on and to talk about queer movies, a queer movie, and I asked them to all sort of pick their favorite one, whether it was a performance or a film. I think I said in the email, it's very loosely defined. If you think it's queer, then it probably is. So without further ado, hello to all of my friends and contributors. I'm going to have them go around and say hello.
Hi, I'm Max Bever.
Hey, it's Rob.
It is Matt Jackson here.
And rounding it out, Lauren Emily Whalen.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Regular listeners of the show hopefully recognize and know those voices. They've all been on a number of episodes, and I couldn't be doing this podcast without them. So I've said it privately. I've said it privately in emails. I'm going to say it publicly now. Thank you to each and every one of you for every episode you've ever hopped on, every conversation that we've had regarding planning and moving things around. I know sometimes things get switched up last minute, and everybody's always been super flexible, super helpful, super interested and excited to help out. This was just a fun little project that I started 4 years ago now. Did not expect to get to 100 episodes. I don't think I expected to get to 10 episodes. So each one is sort of a fun little gift that I have. And I've thought over the last 4 years, I've had moments where I think about, why am I doing this? I'm not Joe Rogan. I don't have huge download numbers, but I love movies, and talking about movies is one of my favorite things. And it's just enough people out there that have kept listening that I've thought I don't want to give it up yet, because we're doing something right and I'm having fun. So like I said, rambling a lot. I asked everybody to kind of come up with their favorite queer film. And we can go in alphabetical order, just like we did with the introductions. And then I'll go last. Max, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Brian. Thanks for the invite back. I had to look at our old list and episodes that we've covered together and ones you've covered with your other contributors, because I feel like most things queer or formative is included within the Piece of Pie list. So kudos to that. It was easy to do some research.
There's so much more. So that's why. I mean, hopefully maybe we'll get to 200, because there are many more movies and things to talk about. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I got a little bit split on two that were very formative for me at a young age, and that's been on my mind. Asking that same question to people as part of my own podcast, I Live at the Music Box, with a queer episode that's coming up. And for my own, I've already kind of picked two, and let's just get to one. But we've covered Addams Family Values in the past, but I'm going to go with My Own Private Idaho as my own personal favorite. That was one that I caught at age 12, just watching it late at night with IFC. Us aging millennials know that you had to wait until about 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. on the cable channels to get to the good stuff. And that one just hit me like a ton of bricks as one of the finest and most complete American queer films. It was funny, it was sexy, it was sad, it was sometimes boring, it was often very pretentious. We had a whole period of nearly 30 minutes that were dedicated to a Shakespeare play. But there's the scene and the performance, Brian, that keeps coming back to me when I think about a definition of my own personal favorite queer film. And that's the scene by the fireplace with both Joaquin Phoenix and Keanu Reeves. And just the amount of tenderness, especially between two sex workers, but between somebody who doesn't identify as gay or queer necessarily, and somebody who does, being able to share their experience and share an embrace and be there for each other, despite where the story ends up going, because it was always inevitably going to go that way. So that's still always what's going to pop in my mind first when thinking about my favorites.
That's a really solid addition. That was on my letterbox in my favorites. I have a bunch of gay movies because I'm gay, and that's my whole thing.
No.
And that's one of them. Well, like queer cinema is like one of my things in this podcast and everything. So I made it. It's The Living End, My Own Private Idaho, Velvet Goldmine, and I'm blanking on the other one. But when talking about that campfire scene, I think it's worth pointing out again. If you haven't listened to that episode, we talked about it. But that campfire scene was River Phoenix's idea. I've always, that's my favorite sort of like trivia fact about that movie, because it basically shows you that he was in touch with that side of himself. And he wasn't afraid to go there as an actor, as a performer. And at that stage in his career, that takes such balls. Of course, his life and career ended tragically a couple years later. I think that says so much about him as a person, and it adds so much to the movie that, like I said, it's sort of my favorite little trivia bit about that film.
It's certainly really one of the more vulnerable, I think, queer films that's not directly related to coming of age or anything else. And its episodic nature just always is easy for me to fall back in and rewatch it, wherever I can find it. It is one that I do revisit often, and so it is one that stays very top of mind. I don't think Gus Van Sant ever made a better film, and that's saying as someone who generally still likes Gus Van Sant, despite all the directions he's taken in his career. But I think that he was able to do something very important at the right time of new queer cinema. It's a really loving and lasting tribute to Portland and to the people that Gus Van Sant obviously surrounded himself with and was obsessed with before he went full Hollywood.
I will say that I still need to see the movie. I know. But honestly, devoting 30 minutes to a Shakespeare play sounds perfect to me.
It's still a better idea in theory than it might be in practice, especially that we're requiring Keanu Reeves to put on yet another Shakespearean accent for that period. But them doing Henry IV just in the middle of their gay hustler film is still, I don't know, it ages well, I think.
Yeah, any movie that entreats Keanu Reeves to do an accent is going to be a winner in my book.
Lauren, I do think you would like it. It's a Shakespearean gay hustlers. So,
well, I was just going to say that that's a pretty good sell, Max. I feel like I came to Gus Van Sant not even specifically knowing that he was a queer director when I first encountered him, and then my first, I think, direct experience of his more definably queer work was Malinoche, which I'm still. I would like a redeeming movie after that one.
We all watched that one together, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
yeah. That was a couple dozen episodes back. I think we had the same feeling. It was very much a chapbook on film, but more of a throat clearing for a young director getting there. So.
Yeah, my favorite cliche to sort of dodge responsibility for hating on classically respected or lauded queer movies is to say it was of an era, and that movie was definitely a period piece in some ways.
It's definitely a Gus Van Sant movie. Like it's very unique to him, and I can appreciate it for that as a piece of art that only he could have done.
Yeah, well, the first of 4 male hustler movies in a row, basically.
Well, sure.
Who's next?
I think it's Rob Cameron with the C.
With the C, that's me. So it took me a while. I thought about this. I had a lot of different contenders. I think I may have had a different answer if you asked about our favorite gay movie, but thinking about queer movies and really formative experiences, I'm gonna have to go with the movie I've loved since the age of 2 or 3, which is Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
That's a really good answer.
It's I think that there's just something about like that character that Paul Rubens has created that we're just completely owns who he is and completely is himself, and owns those attractive and unattractive qualities. And I mean, I was a big fan of Playhouse. And then the movie was just like just so much fun for me as well. Um, and yeah, I think it definitely had an impact that I carried with me and probably influenced a fair amount of my personality until the voices on the playground kind of make you tone that side of you down. But yeah, that's what I'd go with.
I feel like this is maybe a cliche question, but what was it about Pee Wee as a character that really drew you to him?
I think there is just that way of, he's a very enigmatic character, right? He goes through that movie, he goes through Playhouse, and everyone is just completely obsessed with him, wants to be around him. Even Francis is obsessed with him in some way, to the point of jealousy. Um, but I think just, I think sometimes before we realize that we're gay, we realize that we're different, that something's just different. And I think that he's just a character where yeah, he's just a little different than everyone, but very unapologetically so. And of course, none of this would have been going through my mind as a young kid, but looking back in retrospect, I do think it had that impact. Plus, you have Elvira showing up and big dinosaurs, and I think you have Pee Wee in drag. I mean, he does the scene in drag in the car. Like that probably was my first exposure to drag. Now that I think about it,
Wow.
I will still break out the tequila dance every now and then.
Me
nice,
too.
nice, classic moment. I was reading today. Apparently, he actually hit his head in that scene. That's a very real reaction.
I did want to say that I purposefully didn't ask any of you what you were choosing, and so it's really fun to like. I didn't know either of those movies. I don't know what Matthew and Lauren are going to say, and the fact that you just threw out Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I was like, I'm so glad I didn't ask. Like I'm happy for the surprise in person. Like, you know what I mean? Because like I said, that's a really good choice. And it's also very you, I feel like.
That's fair. Yeah.
But I have to ask, what would have been if I had been more specific about gay? Do you have? And I know that maybe I'm putting you on the spot, so if you don't have that answer at the top of your head, but
that was almost a harder question for me to answer in a lot of ways. Trick was a very big deal to me when I first saw it with Lauren, actually.
Yes!
Watched it in my room back at my parents' house. I
then made him a mix CD that was called "Where's the Goddamn Fucking Cheese on My Fries."
That's absolutely right. One of Tori Spelling's two fantastic performances.
And we've covered them both.
We've covered them both.
Are you counting her television series So Notorious, though?
I'm not.
No, he said two.
I don't know. Like, Call Me by Your Name is one of my favorites, but I also didn't really want to talk about that one either, and it wasn't necessarily very formative. It's just a movie I really enjoy that happens to be gay. So when I really was thinking about the word queer, and it did open it up to, like Max said, Addams Family Values and those types of movies. I thought a lot about just queer coding in kids movies that kind of crossed my mind as well. But Pee-wee felt like it. I will never ever think of the Alamo without hearing Jan Hook say, "Well, there's no basement in the Alamo." it doesn't get better than that. And to be exposed to like some of those comedy legends at such a young age, not necessarily realizing that I was being exposed to them, um, was just absolutely incredible in retrospect.
It's a really subversive movie, and Tim Burton movies, or at least his better movies, and we talked about it with Ed Wood. They're about outcasts and loners, and Pee-wee is the ultimate sort of outcast in our world. But you're right; everybody in the movie and the show like wants to be around him, but he does sort of have his own weird little family around him as well.
I also really love the Hollywood stuff at the end. Like even as a very young kid, like I think that kind of like started kind of an obsession with, the backstage like aspect of movies, like that scene of like the chase through the studios. It's just classic. It's making me want to revisit it. I probably haven't seen it in a good 15-20 years. But I need to get on that.
You should. It holds up. I've seen it within the last like 5 years.
Nice.
It's hold up. It's real good. I know all of you guys know me, and you know I quote movies all the time. I had a longtime ex who did not quote movies, but his one movie quote was from this. It was, "I don't need to see it. I lived it."
Yeah,
He said it all the time, and it was really annoying.
Playhouse was super formative for me as well. I still kind of want to be Miss Yvonne.
Yes.
I saw The Matrix and Apocalypse Now, and I was like, that's Cowboy Curtis. I just really, I loved the idea of like all these weirdos coming together and having like their own little environment that was just fun and cool and offbeat all of the time. And I have thought about that before, how like Pee-wee's Playhouse just really informed the person I became.
I watch the Pee-wee's Playhouse Christmas special every year while wrapping presents. It is one of the few traditions that I have. It is just me and the wrapping paper and the presents and Pee-wee's Playhouse Christmas special. I mean, that introduced me to Katie Lang, Grace Jones, Whoopi Goldberg, Oprah Winfrey. Like it is all stars, and it is just so fun and subversive. I love it so much. And I think like, I mean, we were maybe not Matthew, but the rest of us were at that age where like when Paul Rubens got caught jerking off in a movie theater, and it was like we knew something bad happened, but like there were rumors that he like murdered someone on the playground because none of the adults would tell us what actually happened. And it was a really like odd, confusing time. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, when I finally did like know what it actually was, it probably was when I was starting to figure out that I was gay. And so to like have that like shame attached to that moment, I don't know. Should probably talk to a therapist about that.
But like shame attached to just sex in general too. And it's like, I went to fucking Catholic school, so it's like I was already getting a huge helping of that. But that was absolutely a big thing.
Well, so that's always been my question: is what ages were you guys exposed to? Probably shouldn't say exposed in that context, but what ages did you guys first see Pee-wee? Because I remember, I feel like I totally missed the boat on that, or I think I first saw an episode of Playhouse. My dad showed me one of them when I was probably like 13 or 14, and I just could not make heads or tails of it. I'm like, is he gay? Is it a children's show? Is it an adult show? Like, it was just a semantic overload for me, and I just don't think I really knew what to make of it. It's not that it didn't click. It's just I was like, I feel like I'm tuned to the wrong signal for this.
The thing to remember about that show, though, was that it was on Saturday mornings alongside cartoons.
I was,
and
like,
it was
7.
Yeah,
2 or 3.
Lauren and I are the same age, so I would have been. I remember watching Playhouse before I saw. Was the movie before the show? What's the timeline? Does anybody know?
Yeah. The show ended at 91 because
of the arrest.
I was of that age. Yeah. And I was 6 years old and had a Pee Wee Herman doll. But I do remember at 6 years old, my parents actually told me the truth. They were just kind of like, he went to a movie and he took his pee-pee out. And I was just like, oh, huh. What movie? And then that started another conversation.
My memory of finding out was, I mean, I was 11 and I had very recently discovered what masturbation was, period. And I don't remember ever being lied to about it. I feel like I always knew. I'm not saying that no one, I just don't remember when. I don't remember ever thinking he had murdered somebody. Remember knowing that he went to a porn theater and was jerking off. And then I was just old enough to know what jerking off was. And then I was like, why would you do that in front of people? That was my reaction at 11 years old.
I was able to piece together pretty quickly that it was something about like exposing yourself in a movie theater. It took me until much longer to realize that that was absolutely the thing that everyone was doing in that location and why people went to that location.
I was going to say, I was the weird 11-year-old who read the newspaper. So I knew from the beginning, but like Rob, it took me a while to figure out that like that's what that movie theater was there for.
Right. I think, yeah, I knew that happened, but I didn't know what kind of movie they were showing and what that was all about. But I remember I just remember he did that in a movie theater, and that my reaction was like, because I was still very sort of like in the shame spiral of masturbation where I'm like, I figured it out, but no, I don't want anyone to know.
Right.
And so I'm like, why would you do that in public? Like that just like, I couldn't wrap my brain around that.
You know what's so funny is that I'm remembering now. I don't think I ever really realized this, but at the time, you know, I was a teenager when I heard about that. It was kind of like in tandem with me learning who Pee Wee Herman was, and at the time, just because of like not really understanding what the show was, and it just sort of, you know, filling in some erroneous blanks. For some reason I came to the conclusion. I was like, oh, he's a pedophile, he's a molester. Like, what's going on with him? Which is 100% like, you know, the coding that is you know, that he's a sex pest, right? Not that he is one of many people jacking off in an adult movie theater, that, you know, instead that there is something particularly aberrant about him. I never really realized that was my first gloss on Pee-wee.
I can see that because you at your age, learning both of those at the same time makes sense to me.
But that was also like in the era when, what was it, the guy who the puppeteer for Elmo, or, you know, there was a whole rash of stuff about like pedophiles and children's entertainment, and I wasn't sure what exactly Pee-wee's Playhouse was, so there was this weird connecting of the dots that wasn't actually there. I was going outside the lines.
Someone asked about the timeline. So Pee-wee's Playhouse was originally like a show at the Groundlings, and it was a comedy special. It was actually filmed. I actually caught it on HBO one night. He then wrote a draft of a movie called Pee-wee's Big Adventure that was about him and the Playhouse gang going on a road trip. That movie didn't get made. He wrote Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which he calls the bike movie, and that one got made in '85. Then Pee-wee's Playhouse was the children's show was made in '86, and then the less we say about Pee-wee's Big Top Adventure, probably for the best.
There was a movie.
Even as a kid, I didn't like that one.
Didn't he do? There wasn't a recent Pee-wee movie on Netflix?
I couldn't bring myself to watch it. I should one day.
Well, rewatch rewatch Big Adventure first, because that movie, like I said, genuinely holds up. And then if you can bear it, I guess. I don't know if I watched it or not, but I remember it being like a thing.
It was definitely a big thing. I was very excited, and then it came out, and I kind of froze and was like, you know what?
Yeah.
I get that. I didn't watch it either, and it was kind of like, I want to keep my memories of Playhouse as what they are. I did, and thank you for sharing the timeline, Rob. I knew about Groundlings, but I didn't know the rest of the timeline, because I didn't see the movie like in the theaters or anything like that, because I was 5 and I was going to movies, but still kind of young, so I didn't see it until way later. But that's interesting.
I feel like I saw it. I must have seen it. Like I probably He probably watched the TV show when it came on, had never seen the movie, and then went back and watched the movie. Like whenever it was on, we were like, oh, it's on VHS. Like, let's rent this. Was probably how but I definitely remember watching it a lot. And Paul, but I want to say though, Paul Rubens is fantastic. He didn't do anything wrong and is a legitimately talented actor. And I really like him as the Penguin's dad at the beginning of Batman Returns. And of course, he's the best part. He's the only thing about the Buffy movie that makes it worth watching.
Oh, I was going to say Blow, too. He's really good in that.
I remember that, yeah. Yeah, he's great when he shows up.
Yeah.
You know that the Penguin's mom is Simone from Pee-wee's Big Adventure, right?
I remember that now that you said it, but I didn't have it in mind when I was thinking about Paul Rubens, but you're right.
Love that Burton brought both of them back. And that would have been right after his big scandal, too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Burton threw
that was probably his first big role. And I remember
I remember that because it was a big deal that he was in Batman Returns because that movie was a big deal.
Yeah. I also remember the year, or the I think it was probably the MTV Video Awards. He opened as Pee-wee, and his opening line was, "Has anybody heard any good jokes lately?"
Absolutely,
which I thought was really funny. Yeah. But enough about Pee-wee. We're gonna have to talk about some Pee-wee movies in the near future. Whose turn is it? Matthew, right?
Well, Brian, I tried really hard, and I promised myself that I wasn't going to talk about Shark Tale, so I won't.
What?
But yeah, I have a whole spiel on Shark Tale. I mean, as long as we're talking about formative queer movies,
you can talk about Shark Tale. This is probably
now I want to hear about Shark Tale.
Yeah, this is a
Shark
hard sell. Okay, I am going to be.
It might be. Well,
I know it. I'm going to hit mute. I'm going to go to the bathroom real fast. I'm going to let Matthew tell his Shark Tale story.
Yeah, Brian's hitting mute, so we don't get the feedback while I'm talking about Shark Tale. I mean, Shark Tale was my official choice.
Okay, but I think we've backed you into talking about Shark Tale though.
It was Marty Scorsese as a blowfish, right?
Yes. Yeah. You can't say no to that. And I just remember it's one of those movies that sort of I wasn't really aware of it at the time, although I guess Who is for their Queer Awakening Kids movie, but I rediscovered it my first year in college and was watching it again and was going, this is a lot more blatant than I remember it being. And in fact, I was talking to my dad about it. I was like, do you remember that movie? And he paused for a second. He's like, that's the one about the shark that's a little bit different. And I was like, yeah, that's the one. But it's funny. Wow, I sincerely did. I promise you. I told myself I wasn't going to talk about Shark Tale, but here we are. It's funny. A lot of movies carry the same kind of overly generalizable themes about accepting yourself despite being odd or nerdy or socially off-putting or something that makes you bullyable, an easy target. And a lot of those movies sort of do have a lot of crossover legibility with queer themes. To the extent that they can be read as queer, but this one really is a coming out story. It's about Jack Black, who plays a shark, a very kind of effete shark in a mafia family that is all machismo.
Wait, I thought Will Smith played the shark.
No, Will Smith is the fish.
My apologies.
Jack Black is the shark, and they team up because they both kind of have a little bit of a masculinity crisis going on. Will Smith wants to prove that he is worthy of the love of some crazy sexualized fish played by Angelina Jolie. I think they gave that fish hips and lips. It's crazy to the extent that you can do for a fish. But so he wants to prove that he's capable of taking down the threats to the city, which are the sharks. And Jack Black's shark character is a runaway from home because he is in a scene that is pretty blatantly conversion therapy. He is forced by his father's goons to try to eat a fish, but he can't do it because he's a vegetarian, which is not only portrayed as a difference of philosophy, but as a biological difference that he can't overcome. Every time he tries to eat fish, let's pause and reflect on that for a second. He gags, he throws up, he can't do it, he can't keep it down. And so he absconds with Will Smith's fish character. Everybody thinks him dead, and he goes into hiding, painting himself up in dolphin drag, wearing different clothes. He works at Will Smith's place of work, which is this car wash, with a whale wash in the movie. And the scene of his outing basically involves his father being like, "Why are you dressed up like this? What is my son doing dressed up like this?" It's very blatant. And the vegetarian as queerness coding is very funny to me, and I think it actually does a respectable job at pulling off that metaphor in a way that it is still, it gets past the censors, so to speak, and that it is not a movie literally about queerness, but it is the most about queerness kids movie that I have seen that doesn't address it in so many terms. That being said, the movie that I was going to talk about was a movie that I thought was significant because it not only reflected the resonant kind of desire that a lot of queer movies do that make them notable in your upbringing, and seeing this hidden part of yourself come to life on screen. It was specifically the entanglement of desire and resentment, and that is Claire Denis' Beau Travail. I'm a big Claire Denis head. I'm a big Denis Lavant head. I love Beau Travail specifically because it is a queer movie that is all about sort of the enmeshed tension of being incredibly attracted to somebody and also hating them so much you could pull your hair out. In this movie, I guess nobody really has hair. It's all about this. It's all about this French Foreign Legion that is stuck in the middle of Djibouti. The whole point of the movie is that they've long overstayed their welcome. They have no real mandate to be there anymore. The whole movie is basically just them running training exercises while the locals look on at them, being like, "What the hell are you guys doing? There's nothing to govern here, or there's no threat to the French Empire that you need to be expanding your walls towards." In this case, yeah, it's a film about listlessness, and it's based off of Melville's Billy Budd. But the whole point of the movie is Denis Lavant's character is kind of the cock of the walk. He is this strong, silent type who spends most of his time brooding, and he's a favorite of the captain. But that is all upended when a new, muscular young guy comes on the scene and quickly makes himself the new favorite of the captain and very popular among the ranks. And Denis Lavant's character does not like getting his daddy attention usurped. Of course, none of this boils over the surface because it's a Claire Denis movie, so it's all about silence and tension and brooding and texture and all that stuff and body contact. But it's extraordinarily homoerotic. It's all about sort of like these barely repressed feelings, which extend to the confusion between feelings, not just desire. It's about this weird kind of mix of feelings towards your object of attraction / adversary. And it has the best closing scene in any movie ever. Spoiler alert for Beau Travail, but it ends with this, this completely silent movie, very ruminative, very slow, very methodical. Ends with a scene where Denis Lavant is deciding whether or not he wants to kill himself. He makes his bed, he lies down, puts a gun to his chest, and very slowly you start to hear the song, The Rhythm of the Night. And it just cuts to him in a nightclub doing the goofiest, most cathartic dance ever while the entirety of Rhythm of the Night plays over the end credits. It's ambiguous, it's crazy, it's weird, and it's very gay. And every time I see that movie, it catches me by surprise, that ending. It's so great. I love it so much. So my answers are Shark Tale and Beau Travail. I cheated.
That really is one of the best endings, and I think one of the first to figure out that if you've got Denis Lavant in your movie, make him dance.
Oh yeah, oh my god. Well, they do that too in Mauvais Song.
Oh yeah,
that amazing scene where he's running down the streets to Modern Love. He's such a physical actor. He came from the circus. He is he's just a ball of energy. He's a little Energizer bunny whenever he's on the screen, and he's got the weirdest looking face.
he was kind of cute when he was a twink, or at least in Mauvais Sang still. I mean, a scene so good that Noah Baumbach had to steal it outright. Yes. Everyone still thinks that's from Francis Ha.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too because Leos Carax, who directed him in Mauvais Song and in Holy Motors and other things, I think he, when he was moving on to do Annette from this 2 years ago, past year, and he opted for Adam Driver in the lead role outside of his, instead of Denis Lavant. And he said he chose Adam Driver because he and Denis Lavant both have kind of like a simian face. They both have this strange, unusual kind of monkeyish face to them. And I think that's definitely a way to describe Denis Lavant's face. He looks a little bit Cro-Magnon.
I have to confess, I've never seen that movie. I know we've talked about that, Matthew. I know we've talked about doing an episode on it, but I have yet to watch it. But I want to just circle back to the Shark's Tale. We recently did an episode on Frosty the Snowman and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and we're finally able to do an episode on queer-coded children's films. And I think I've asked all of you at some point about like what would be some queer-coded Christmas or children's films, and Matthew always came back with A Shark's Tale, and my thing was like, I'm not watching A Shark's Tale. And so when he brought it up, that's why I was like, oh no. But that was his opportunity, and I'm glad. No, that's your moment.
I won't say that it stands up to scrutiny. I won't go that far. But I do think it is a unique and interesting cultural artifact. That and my other bugbear is Teacher's Pet, but that's a different story.
I think we should be saying Oscar nominated Shark Tale. Thank you. It was nominated and lost to The Incredibles that year.
Well, and the main character's name is Oscar. So,
well, but before we get away from Beau Travail, Brian, I think that one it's tough because it got buried under the avalanche of greatness that was 1999. And especially with even as full as independent movie theaters were, it just wasn't playing in America as much, even though that it was championed by a lot of critics. I came to that one after I had seen Billy Budd, because 1999, The Limey came out, and I was obsessed with Terrence Stamp, and when the movie came out, so I went to where I watched Billy Budd, which was I think his first film performance and his first Oscar nomination. And really fell in love with the story that way. So when I got to Beau Travail just a couple of years later, I was like, "Huh, this sure seems familiar." And of course, yes, it's a retelling of classic Melville story, which was very gay to begin with.
Yeah, well, we'll cover it soon for sure, because I do want to see it. It's on my watch list officially.
It is one of those movies that I think it just kind of dug its hooks in me. I remember the first time I saw it was for a film class in college and found it actually very boring for most of the movie. It's very slow, and I was just literally shaken out of my reverie by the end scene, and it like became a meme among me and my friends. It just became like this inside joke about Beau Travail, and whenever Rhythm of the Night came on, you would go feral. And then I kept coming back to it. Every subsequent time I saw it, I loved it more and more and more. And I really do think it's got a good handle on this sort of internalized complexities of jealousy and attraction, and all of it in a term that my friend, I don't know if he coined this for the first time, I doubt it, but one that he coined among our friend group that we use all the time, jealousy. Portmanteau of jealousy and lust, for that feeling when you don't know if you want to be somebody, if you want to fuck them, if you want to beat them with a brick, if it's just this crazy primal tension between, you just get all riled up. And I think this movie expresses that pretty well.
I think I've not seen the movie, but I really, I like that term jealousy. And I think that it's something that, we all kind of really held on to, or at least I did when I was, still maybe like feeling those feelings and didn't know exactly what they were. Like, I mean, I just thought Omri Katz in Hocus Pocus was just really, really cool, right? Like I just thought he was awesome.
I just really need to be his friend somehow.
Me with Anna Klumsky and My Girl.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I think everybody has those, especially when you're a queer kid and you're not allowed to, or you're not taught that it's okay to think that about someone of the same gender. So yeah, it's not Yeah. We all had, mine was Michael J. Fox.
Nice.
I saw Teen Wolf more than I should have.
Mhm.
There's only two more people left. Lauren, do you want to give us your pick?
Yes. So I thought about this too. I'm not going to talk about this movie, but I do want to bring up that uh, Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman in Batman Returns was probably part of my bisexual awakening. Not only because obviously she's hot, but also the whole like being very buttoned up and repressed, and then fucking letting it go during a really memorable montage that ends up in her being super sexy and morally ambiguous. And super sexy and morally ambiguous are two things I still strive to be. So I did want to do a little shout out to Batman Returns. I will also say, Matthew, thank you for your rundown of Shark's Tale. I did not see that. I was way out of the target demographic, and I'm not a person who watches animated movies usually. I will say that the cover of Car Wash is still one of my favorite songs. It was playing at Target a few weeks ago, and I was feeling it. And also, but I never understood why that was covered by Missy Elliott and Christina Aguilera for that movie. But now I know that there's a car wash in the movie.
And they
So-
make fish versions of Missy Elliott and Christina Aguilera
that's
for the
fucking
credit scene. It's
awesome.
so good. It's so funny.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm gonna have to find that then, because that just makes my little early aughts heart so happy. So I was definitely going to talk about, well, I'm still definitely going to talk about Mulholland Drive. I will say, just as a preamble, I came out relatively late, not until my 37th birthday. You know, in large part because bisexuality is still just a very complicated thing, even among the queer community, how it is received. So, kind of a challenge. But also, a lot of the media, when I was coming of age in the late 90s, like watching a lot of indie films in the early aughts, a lot of queer cinema was centered on young gay men. And me as an ally was watching a lot of it. And there were some about lesbians, certainly none about bi women. And then in the late aughts, I saw Mulholland Drive. And I remember, because I was living with Rob at the time, and we didn't have cable. It just came up on like MeTV or something, and it was the Club Silencio scene, and I was fucking transformed. I eventually rented it, then I bought it. I recently, to tie into Max's podcast, I saw it at the Music Box several months ago. First time I saw it on the big screen. It was absolutely incredible. It is still just one of the queerest movies I have ever seen, and one of the queerest, most femme movies I've ever seen, because it's about sexuality, but not, and it is a whole fucking mood. It is a whole fucking bisexual mood. And my runner-up was going to be Heavenly Creatures, which I did see as a young woman. My friends and I rented it, and we watched it, and pretended to be horrified at the girl-on-girl sex scene, which the most horrified was my friend Ryan, who eventually came out as homosexual to the surprise of none of us, and my little repressed bisexual self. To further explain, I recently wrote a rough draft of an essay about why I love movies about blondes who kill people. So I'm going to read a bit of a passage about Mulholland Drive and Heavenly Creatures, if you all will indulge me. In Mulholland Drive, it's unclear whether Diane's former girlfriend Camilla actually cheated or just unceremoniously dumped Diane for hotshot film director and attractive asshole Adam Kesher, whose movie The Sylvia North Story is gonna make her a star. And let's face it, as a society, we're still not at the point where an openly queer woman can be an old school movie diva, and we sure as hell weren't there in 1999. Maybe Camilla was just doing what she had to do, but Diane is a head over heels queer woman with a stilted acting career and very possible mental instability, so hiring a skeezy hitman it is. Equally murky and probably the most sympathetic victim is Pauline's mother in Heavenly Creatures. She also might have the most graphic death of the bunch. One word, brick. On the one hand, she's just a 1950s New Zealand mom whose daughter is clearly in an unhealthy, codependent relationship built on an entirely made-up world. Any functional parent would be concerned and probably eventually ban their kid from seeing their toxic friend. On the other hand, she's a little overly concerned with the fact that Pauline's unhealthy, codependent relationship is with another girl and kind of pushes an older guy on her daughter, as well as a quote-unquote therapist who enunciates homosexual in a close-up that's singularly terrifying. On the other hand, it's the 1950s and queer phobia is rampant everywhere, so it's a more societal problem. No matter how you slice it, though, the brick murder is a lot, even if Kate Winslet is one of the gals executing it. And scene. Then I go into talking about Jennifer's Body, which is like my runner-up for formative queer movies. And again, you know, there's murder and there's girls kissing girls, and you know, I'm thrilled with it all.
Well, thank you for sharing that paragraph from your essay. That was fantastic. And I need to just bite the bullet and buy a region-free DVD on eBay for $30 of Heavenly Creatures, because it's been forever.
Then we can talk about it.
Yes. I saw it. I feel like I saw it like on VHS, and I probably had it on in the background or something. I don't even have any memory of it whatsoever. But I love Kate Winslet.
First role.
Yeah.
Or might have been first or one of her first, and you watch it and you're like, yeah, Kate Winslet.
And Melanie
Linsky.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
She knows how to survive. I love Melanie.
Oh,
Yeah,
she's
fantastic.
But
Mulholland. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, go ahead.
No, Mulholland Drive. That was your first episode with us. That was a fun one.
That and Gone Girl.
With Gone Girl, yeah. That is a movie. I talked about this in the episode, but I saw it in the theater when it was brand new at 19, and I hated it. It took me a few years to come around. I had to kind of see it a couple of times. I had to read about it a little bit. Roger Ebert's review was fantastic.
Yes.
It's not one that I fully admit I didn't get it the first time I saw it. But now it's one of my favorites, and I think it's absolutely, fantastic and brilliant. And it's David Lynch movies. David Lynch is one of the few filmmakers who I feel like you can describe his films as a mood. Yeah. And you always know when it's David Lynch.
Yes. It's also, you know, part of me feels a little bad, you know, describing these like queer female films that are directed by men, but both of them are so good. And even like, okay, the sex scene in Mulholland Drive, which even in my late 20s had never seen anything like that in a movie. And it's, I don't know. I don't think I'd call it male gazy. Maybe it is a little bit, but I sure as hell love gazing upon it too. And it's also a scene where both of the characters are just very clearly into it and into each other. And I really love that, because I feel like with another filmmaker, something like that could have been so fucking sleazy. And it's not. It's lovely. And so, yeah, go David Lynch.
Important for 2001, too, that something that explicit and that sexy and that fun and that dramatic was the centerpiece of that film. And I was lucky enough, I got to see that on a gay date, an early high school gay date. I had to travel across the northern suburbs to one of the theaters playing it, and he brought along his friend, but we were still, we had went
That's such a bad date movie,
with
though.
each other. No,
I
well,
can't
we were
imagine
three
seeing that on a
pretentious.
date.
We were three pretentious film fans.
Okay.
I met this guy at the theater festival, in the middle of Illinois that they do every year for high schools. So that was like our treat. And yeah, it was something that bowled me away at the time too, but also because there was a good amount of coverage. And I was a David Lynch fan since I saw Dune when I was 11. So I'd been, consuming and catching up for so long. So when it had been a while since he had made, I guess it'd only been a couple of years since Straight Story. So there was this anticipation.
Mhm.
You just made a good film, but that was a G-rated Disney film.
Right.
Yes. And then there was a lot of coverage about being that it's half a discarded pilot. That this is built on the bones of a television pilot is what really I think makes that the best film of the 21st century. Is that it's able to use everything, be so resourceful to tell such a complete story about David Lynch's feelings on Hollywood, but just this very, very complete, kind of straightforward. The best thing I think about Mulholland Drive is that I think it's one of the most straightforward of David Lynch's films. You just have to watch it 5 or 6 times.
No, agreed.
I think the things that we used to, like puzzle about or connect on the internet early, or the infamous when it was released on DVD at first, I believe by the Criterion Collection, it didn't come with chapters. You weren't allowed to skip. And it came with a list of hints and clues from David Lynch himself.
Yeah, when I did a lecture on it for a midnight cult film series at Facets when I worked there. And I actually, so to make it like legal to get around any, they're paying to see a movie, we had to have a handout for the lecture. So I did the 10 clues. And then at the end, like the discussion, everyone was like, let's do the 10 clues. Like, let's talk about like, where it was. And it was so much fun. And yeah, that's something I became aware of like early on after I watched it through the first time. I was good old IMDb and I was like looking at the 10 clues and I was like, this is amazing. And that's when I became aware that it was a discarded pilot. And I was like, oh, that explains a lot of things, but that also just adds to my enjoyment of it. Not like, oh, like this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. It's like, oh, that explains it. And yeah, like that just, I fucking love Mulholland Drive.
I mean, when Robert Forster shows up for just about 5 seconds of the whole thing, I mean, these are the type of things I think that improve and add to the dreamlike quality, or at least the type of dreams that I have, where it's just like, well, that's that random scene before we go into this random scene before we head into the nightmare.
Exactly. For me, that's the scene with the sex worker and like the hitman. I'm like, that is something I would have a dream about, where like this is kind of not related to anything else, but it just sort of makes sense. Also, it is still a dream of mine to do the monologue in Winkies, like for an audition someday, because that's still just one of my favorite monologues ever. And it's just, ooh, it's so good. It's so brilliant. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing it at Music Box on the big screen. It just made it even more special. And like, it was really cool to walk out of the theater and just hear like everybody talking about like, oh, like this is what he thought of Hollywood. And oh, like just, it was just really neat. I was like, it's still a movie that inspires like people walking out of the theater, like having these conversations on the way to the Brown line. And it was just, just love it.
That's amazing. I would have loved to have seen that. I did, like I said, I saw it in the theater originally, but I didn't think of anything of it at the time because I didn't like the movie. And I misspoke earlier. I think I said 1999 earlier.
I misspoke actually, because I think the pilot was like 1999, but the movie was 2001. Because that's right, because I should know better, because Brian, I sent you, I think IMDb posted it recently had its 21st anniversary. Yeah. So honestly, though, if I had seen it when I was in college, when it actually came out, I don't know if I would have liked it either. I think like I finally saw the whole thing in my mid-20s and then it all
Yeah.
gelled. But, you know, college Lauren was, Rob can probably attest to this. College Lauren was a whole different person. Um, so I probably, same with Heavenly Creatures, I probably would have been very intrigued by all of it, but just been like, Psh, that was stupid. So yeah.
Yeah. I actually wanted to circle back though real quick to what Max said about how it's his most sort of straightforward movie. And I've seen it 8 or 9 times. And of all the words I would use to describe it, straightforward is not one of them. I still think there's a lot of yes, there's a lot of like metaphors and things, but there's also just a lot of stuff that you're just like, what the fuck? What the
I know,
fuck?
but just keep watching it though.
You
too,
know what?
because, like,
I was gonna say the more I watch it too, I'm more like, oh yeah, like of course that's where it's going. Whereas like earlier I would have been like, what the fuck? And then, you know, it's the whole dream thing, but it also just does make sense in a straightforward
I mean,
way.
it does in the sense that it's Mulholland Drive, and that's what it is, right? Like I understand that in that capacity.
but
I
I
don't
mean,
know,
like,
maybe
oh, I'm sorry, Lauren.
straightforward in that capacity.
Well,
I'll take
or
it.
that you keep making your own meanings, maybe, or that you
Yeah.
find your meanings
Yeah.
in some of the randomness in scenes. Because even when Lauren just said, you know, the scene with the sex worker and the hitman, I'm like, oh, but that's like showing that, you know, like that's our other mirror version of Naomi Watts, and we're seeing them interact with the hitman for the
'Cause
first
they've
time,
got
and it's
similar
setting up
hair. You're right.
this and her hair, and you know what Diane has been forced to be, you know, to be done since she got to Hollywood too. So, but you know, I think that's just all of the wonderful things that are laid at our feet for that movie, is to take it. I think that it's straightforward in my mind because I have built my own story for Mulholland Drive.
That makes sense. Yeah,
out of all
I
of
can
those
see
pieces,
that.
I think. And
Yeah.
and Lauren, I did miss it at the last David Lynch retrospective at the Music Box. I tried to catch a lot of other ones, but I did catch it the year previously where Rebecca Del Rio came for a concert.
I remember when that happened and I really wanted to go and I can't remember why I couldn't. I will say this time, not quite as cool, but they did have the No High Banda guy from Club Silencio.
Oh, that's
and
right. That's right.
He started by walking on stage and saying no high Vonda, and I was just like, I'm dead. Like, take me now. This is the best moment. Please go ahead, because I want to hear about Rebecca Del Rio.
Well, I mean, and with that screening, you also had like Daniel Knox making his pre-shows and everything else. It's great. And for the Rebecca Del Rio concert, though, is we had nearly a 4-hour experience because we all were kind of sold the ticket and it was like, she's going to show up, she's going to do a couple songs, or like, I think I told my friends, I'm like, she's going to do the songs from the movie. That, you know, that's it. And then she gets there and it's like right after quarantine reopened all the movies in theaters again. And she, you know, did her 2 songs. We're all just kind of like, great, that's great. And then she's just like, no, I've got this opportunity. I am singing as much as I can. And as we start to like look at our watches at 45 minutes, we're just like, she's taking this seriously. Yeah.
Wow.
But it was just a great experience. And to have a concert, you know, by that artist at the Music Box and then have that movie.
Hey.
Yeah, we were a little tired the next day, but it was quite the experience. Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Because, yeah, I figured she would do Crying and maybe one more, but
nope. She is a whole ham and a half. I love it. She came in and she's just like, I've got 4 other albums. I'm gonna pick some songs from here. And like it was just like you gave Mama Rose the microphone for the night and she was gonna have it her way. So
I love it.
That's amazing. Rob, have you seen Mulholland Drive?
No, I'm actually like been trying to like somewhat zone out of this conversation because I haven't.
I'm sorry, babe.
No, it's totally fine.
No, don't be sorry.
It's been out for how long? This is on me that I have not seen it. Like, I cannot blame myself for any semblance of a spoiler in it's all.
I don't think we spoiled anything.
Quite honestly, I was gonna say, like, we've been saying such disjointed things that I think you're gonna be fine.
Right.
I think I'm going to be just fine. Yeah.
Out of context, none of that makes any sense.
Yeah, when the cowboy talks to the director and he warns him about this, and
he doesn't have eyebrows.
He sees him again. Oh my god!
And Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yeah.
I'm actually it's so funny because I'm curious to see what Brian's movie is, just because I have not seen anyone else's selection at this point. I'm just curious to see what that holds.
I believe it will, because I don't believe you've seen this movie. My pick was The Living End.
Yep, there we go.
That's just a movie that we did an episode on it. If I remember correctly, we did an episode on it because I decided to watch it, and I was so affected by it that I wanted to watch it and talk about it again. It's one that I've revisited since. I discovered it very late, but it's one that but it's just that it's a primal scream from the queer community from the 90s. And I hear it.
Primal scream that from the gutter, I believe.
I hear that scream and I feel it in my bones when I watch this movie. And I love it. I don't know. It's heartbreaking and tragic. And it's a hard movie to watch, but like I said, I've revisited a bunch. There's art in the pain, and I think it's like I said, I think it's a true work of art. And I just connect with it a lot. So The Living End is mine for sure.
Right. I mean, this is a great pick, but I feel like you're kind of selling the tragic elements when it's also one of Greg Araki's first films. So it's still like sexy and stupid and full of dumb,
funny. It's real funny and like random.
And we start off with like murderous lesbians too, so it's like a very funny comedy too.
Yeah.
My ears perked up at murderous lesbians. But I have not seen this either, and it sounds honestly like it's ticking all the boxes for me, like arty and primal scream and queer and 90s and Greg Araki. So
for those if you haven't seen it, I'll tell you it's about two lovers, and I believe it's 1990, maybe 91. And they both recently learned that they're HIV positive. And they basically go on a Bonnie and Clyde kind of crime spree because they're going to die. And they're just like, fuck this. One of them is, and then another one is sort of talked into it. And but it's the tension between those two, the guy that really wants to do it and the guy that is like, this is insane. Like, this is criminal. We're hurting people. That intersection is where I respond to it the most.
Nice. That's awesome.
Fascinating.
Well,
it's fantastic.
Really, really, really important new queer cinema film at that time. And for 1992, especially when one of the plot is to see if, our characters actually follow through on their plan to go inject George H.W. Bush with their own blood.
Right, and like I think like this most ridiculous sort of like that's sort of like silly, of course, but like I said, the core, like, I don't know. No, the tension at the core is what I respond to.
It needs to be angry. It is an angry piece, and it should be. It's one that I think ages very well, and especially now that we're out of a pandemic. We're out of a pandemic where we see what the government does when it wants to take action very quickly and find a vaccine and find a cure, and instead of just letting it, decimate communities for decades at a time. I think it plays better than ever, and that anger, is fresh as ever too. But I think that it takes that very specific road trip movie approach to tell its story in a very fun and sexy way still, without it becoming didactic.
Yeah, and there is a really hot like shower scene. So it's also like hot.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of hot pause on pause sex, that was something that you didn't see in 1992 or barely see that at all in queer media now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, it's a movie that I've responded to since I saw it. And yeah, basically like when I sort of concocted the question, I knew already what my answer would be.
Rob, Lauren, Matthew, it's also only like 75 minutes, so it's so quick.
That is always a sell.
You haven't seen it, Matthew?
Definitely a sell.
No, I don't think I've seen any Gregor Aki.
Oh, that's surprising.
I know. It
Yeah.
needs to go on my homo homework list. It's already overflowing.
That's okay.
I guess that might have been like a certain age thing though too, or us aging millennials when Mysterious Skin came out in 2004, and that was like a big event as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, I'll always stick up for Kaboom, but I don't think Iraqi's made a movie since Kaboom in what 2010 that's made a
Yeah, I
big
think,
impact. Kind of moved more to television because I think
yeah.
now Apocalypse was charming enough.
No, but these were honestly like some fantastic picks. I'm like I said, I just kind of wanted the episode to be a just a bunch of us hanging out talking movies. That was the whole concept of the podcast. The opening dialogue is, do you want to get a? I like to get a piece of pie and talk about a movie after I've seen it or whatever it is. I've heard it a million times and I can't like quote it off the top of my head, which is crazy. Um, so that's all this ever was, and that's all I ever like wanted it to be. And all of my favorite episodes are exactly that. Um, so thank you guys so much for every single episode, every single time, every single movie. I'm probably gonna watch Mulholland Drive later, I feel like, but maybe not. I know we're
I'm gonna watch
already at
Shark Tale.
no. At this point, I can't. I feel like I can't watch it at this point. I've stood firm for so long that I have to stand for something.
This would
No.
make a great series, all these movies back to back to back.
But if I could be a little self-indulgent, I also wanted to ask you guys, as much as I appreciate um, every episode and every conversation, is there any movie that you watched as a result of this that you wouldn't have watched and are happy you watched, or you wouldn't have watched and like hate that you watched? Just kind of curious.
I think the only answer for me is In and Out. Um, it's from '97, yeah, the
Yeah.
Kevin Kline movie. I had never heard of In and Out prior to that, and we paired that with The Birdcage, correct?
Yeah.
Um, and that was a great pairing, and I saw that for the first time, really enamored with it. Yeah, that's got to be my pick.
I saw In and Out in the theater. Speaking of movies we've seen in theaters,
Uh-huh.
but I was gonna say The Others. That is one that had actually been on my list since it, came out when I was in college. And Brian and I, have talked many times about how Nicole Kidman is a really, really good actress. And, despite, I think, having an Oscar, like we still
Yeah.
don't think she gets enough love. And the interesting thing is, I watched The Others with Brian like right before things were shutting down because of the pandemic. So, and we did that purposefully because we paired it with A Quiet Place. But, Brian was the last person I hung out with in person for a very long time. And we watched The Others, which is about, hunkering down in captivity. And it just, it made it all the more poignant, but it also just, I really enjoyed it. And it was a movie where I'm like, why did I not make it a point to see this earlier?
I don't think I knew that you didn't. I mean, I probably didn't either. Except I had a roommate at the time, so I would have seen him. But I remember that when we had been planning the episode, because we were going to do it with A Quiet Place, because A Quiet Place Part 2 was coming out, and when we recorded it, it hadn't yet been delayed.
Right.
And
Right.
then in the editing process, it got delayed. And so,
Definitely.
but I was like, well, it's done.
Yeah.
I'm going to release it. Like, it's there. Yeah, I remember that. But I don't think I knew that I was their last person to see for a while, and it was The Others. That's fun.
Yeah.
Spending it with Nicole Kidman. There are worse ways.
Exactly.
I don't know what you guys are talking about with her not getting love and attention and respect. I saw at least 8 gays in that AMC commercial pantsuit for Halloween.
You were waiting. You were waiting to drop that clip for you.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Just mouse hovering over that mute button. I was thinking about the fact that I had just kind of purposely stayed away from the Tennessee Williams film adaptations because I had kind of heard how, the dealing with the Hays Code just kind of neutered the stories to such a degree. But Streetcar Named Desire was still really great, and I'm really glad that I saw that one. I could have gone my entire life without seeing that version of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, but I was really happy that I can finally say that I've seen that Streetcar, because it was really something.
Oh, it was fantastic. I was surprised at how much I ended up loving it for sure.
Brian, I was looking through the list and thinking back, and I think the ones that I enjoyed the most was like brand new for all of us to watch, and two like leap to my mind, and Lauren and Matthew are here, but having such a good time when we went to go see Rocket Man, and then going back to your place to record, talking about that and Velvet Goldmine. So it was just a really nice pairing of having one of the better musicals of the 21st century and something that really washed out the bad taste of Bohemian Rhapsody from, I hope, most people's mouths. And then to go talk about one of the best queer films ever made. So that was a lot of fun. And then when we had the night where we paired Identity and Serenity, and Matthew, you and I, we all watched Serenity at my place for the first time. And I think a new cult was in the making. Because I'd always really meant to, since that came out, catch it, and it had been years. So to finally actually to watch it with somebody where it was new for the first time, like you, Brian, and then Matthew, who was the cultist in the making, was a lot of fun. It's probably not your most listened to episode, but I stand by that pairing. I think that those are two perfectly crazy, campy films that are queer adjacent that deserve some more attention still.
It's real low on the download list.
Both of those are definitely movies that demand to be seen with several people on the couch.
Yeah.
Max,
Yeah.
I will say that Velvet Goldmine is the other one that had been on my list since it came out when I was in high school and just couldn't find it anywhere. And knowing we were going to discuss that along with Rocket Man is what finally got me to see it. And oh my God, like, I still think about Velvet Goldmine 3 years after I watched it for the first time, because
#me in college.
fuck, it's so good.
Yeah, as well you should. That one was another very formative one around 98. I got my hands on it, I think, the year after.
Oh, I can imagine.
And so Ian McGregor's many full frontal scenes, as well as that long, almost 3-minute unbroken shot of Christian Bale just getting it from Ewan, at the end there. Chef's kiss.
You mentioned the shot of Christian Bale, and it reminded me that last night I watched Crash for the first time, David Cronenberg's Crash. I bought the Criterion Blu-ray because they had a 50% off sale, and it's not streaming anywhere. But I didn't know that Elias Koteas bottoms for James Spader in that movie. If I had known that, I feel like I would have watched it a lot sooner.
I think that was well hidden, Brian. If like James Spader in '94, which is like out of the packaging James Spader, is on screen rimming Elias Koteas, I mean, like, somebody should have told us this. We should have had easier access.
Right. Well, now I have the Blu-ray if you want it. So. Well, thank you so much. Those were great answers.
Ending on that note about
rimming.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a queer film podcast.
I usually start with rimming, but we can end with rimming. Thank you guys so much for coming on. This was a great conversation. I agree. Streetcar was one that I'm glad I watched and glad I had an excuse to watch, because I had never seen it either, and it was just sort of. I have watched the worst movie I've watched for this podcast was The Meg. Actually, that's not true. It was the Happy Time Murders. Way early days. Because I wanted to talk about Roger Rabbit, and I thought it would be fun to pair it with Roger Rabbit.
Well, The Meg was my first episode when we paired it with Jaws. And at the time, we went to go see it at the Evanston Theater when it was still open. And I got a work call. I left for, I think, approximately 20 minutes. And I came back in and I said, "Did I miss anything?" And you're like, "No."
If only you saved Roger Rabbit for Chip and Dale.
Don't think I didn't think about that when I was watching Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, because I definitely was.
Another highlight of the year, an unexpected highlight of the year, but a great
For
one.
sure. I think honestly, like Chip and Dale's might be like in my top 10 of the year.
Oh, I think
Chip and
undoubtedly.
Dale's or Welcome to Chip and Dale's?
Chip and Dale's with Andy Samberg and John Mulaney. It's very funny. No, but so thanks again, everybody, for coming on. I can't believe it's been 100 episodes. It's absolutely insane. Like I said, I couldn't do it without every single one of you. There's no podcast if I can't have a conversation. And I'm so happy that I'm never at a loss for people to talk to about movies and about gay shit and about gay movies. So do you guys want to hit us with your social media?
Sure. I'm at Max Bever on Instagram and at Max R Bever on Twitter.
I am Paths Will Cross on Instagram and Letterboxd.
I am at Rat Jacko on Twitter and Letterboxd.
I am at Lauren Emily Writes on Instagram, and you can go to laurenemilywrites.com to see links to my books, including the pre-order for my next book, which is out in 2023.
Fantastic. I am So Brian Rowe on Instagram and Letterboxd. I am no longer on Twitter, nor is the podcast. You can find the podcast at Piece of Pie Pod, also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I am also So Brian Rowe on Letterboxd. That's Brian with an I, R-O-W-E. Letterboxd and Instagram. Hit us up. Give us a follow, give us a like, go on iTunes, leave us a review. This is our last episode of 2022, so have a safe and happy new year, and we'll be back at you in January with some more gay shit. See you next time, everybody.